Vignesh Soundarajan, Info 4670 Summer 2020, Term Project Text Mining. Introduce topic and data and why the selection of the dataset. The topic is about the kinds of orders that were made as well as all the relevant order details. The data contains information about the orders that were made, as well as other kinds of textual and numerical information that is relevant to the orders that were made. The particular dataset on orders was selected because it had a lot of textual attributes with information that was related to the orders that were made. The number of entries was also within the specified entry limits. Even simply looking at and analyzing the orders that were made seemed like an interesting thing to do and analyze. So how data was collected and was any cleaning performed? The data was collected by going to Kaggle and finding and searching for data on different kinds of orders that were made and making sure that the number of entries stayed within the required entry limit. Cleaning was performed. Some irrelevant data was removed, such as columns that had ID numbers. Some columns that had unnecessary numbers were not important were also removed. All that was left was data and columns that contained information about customer names and locations, product details, order details, shipping details, dates, and pricing details. Problem, questions to answer, and initial ideas of data analysis and gathering insights. The problem, questions to answer are basically what is typical or normal for the different groups of observations of the textual attributes, such as the product name, customer segment, category, subcategory, product container, ship mode, and order priority. The initial ideas were to find correlation since there was some numerical data, and there were other ideas to find associations or other relationships with the location information and the dates. There were ideas to use and gather the data about pricing and quantity and size of the products to see if there were correlations between them. All these initial ideas, however, were scrapped since they did not really seem viable or doable in any way. These initial ideas did not really make any sense either, and so they were scrapped. Finally, it seemed that finding the typicality or normality of the groups of observations seemed more sensible, viable, and doable. And these are the insights. Data mining techniques used. Well, the data mining technique used here was clustering. Specifically, it was k-means clustering that was used. Using k-means clustering seemed to be the more appropriate data mining technique to use, since this is about finding what is typical or normal for the different groups of observations. Analysis result. Well, here's the final design diagram or the final resulting diagram. The kinds of operators that were used here include the retrieve operator to retrieve the database, the order database, the nominal to text operator to make sure that some of the attributes were transformed into text, the replace missing values operator, the select attributes operator to select the desired attributes per analysis, the process documents operator, the clustering operator for k-means clustering, and the performance operator to find the average distance between the average centroid distance. And then inside the process documents operator was the tokenize operator, the transform cases, which transformed the cases to uppercase, the filter stop words in English operator, and the filter tokens by length operator. So the clustering results within the related result diagrams. Here the analysis and result of that. The average within centroid distance for cluster 0 was negative 0.207. And you can see here with this, with cluster 0, it starts off having something to do with office supplies and things to do with offices and delivery in general, like Xerox and paper and supplies and corporate and office and business and express and regular and consumer and all. And then when it goes to 0, there's little or nothing to do with anything about like office or anything of that like. So with cluster 1, it's the same deal. It starts off having something to do with supplies and other items and things necessary for offices. And then when it goes to 0, all of a sudden, again, little or nothing to do with offices or delivery or anything at all. Same with cluster 2. It starts off as having, there's something to do with like corporate and technology and telephones and offices and consumer and express and business and whatnot. And then when it goes to 0, again, little or nothing to do with offices or supplies at all. And it's the same thing with cluster 3. When cluster 3 gets ranked in decreasing order, it starts off having things to do with like delivery and truck and tables and drum and chairs and all that. And when it goes to 0, again, little or nothing to do with like offices and like delivery stuff and whatnot. Finally, it happens to be the same thing with cluster 4 as well. When cluster 4 gets ranked from least to greater, when cluster 4 gets ranked in decreasing order, again, it has something to do with offices and like computers and pens and supplies. And then when cluster 4 goes to 0, like nothing, little or nothing to do with it at all. And so the average with centroid distance cluster for cluster 0 is negative 0.207. For cluster 1, it's negative 0.793. Cluster 2, it's negative 0.402. With cluster 3, it's negative 0.835. With cluster 4, it's negative 0.962. And so for conclusion and experience working on the analysis, the conclusion here is that the different clusters and the groups of observations all had something to do with the many kinds of office supplies and other things needed for offices, and the kind of delivery required for these office supplies. Scrolling all the way down to the last set of observations in each cluster will show zeros, which mean that there's little or nothing to do with office supplies or the kind of delivery required or other office-related things. This is what happens when ranking the individual clusters in decreasing order. The overall average within the centroid was negative 0.800. As for the Davies-Bouldin number, that number was negative 3.352. So this is what is typical. And the experience working on this analysis was difficult, and it was difficult to find out what to analyze and how to analyze. And difficult